The Philadelphia Eagles completely body bagged the Steelers today. This game went no way the way I expected it to. I thought that the Steelers were going to be able to keep this thing close and competitive. And, right after the first two drives, I knew that this was just a complete mismatch because the Steelers' offense was doing nothing but going backwards. They couldn't get out of their own way. And Jalen Hurts, he was looking like Tom Brady against this defense today. 25 of 32, 290 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. He definitely gave us what we wanted because, leading up to this game, you had the whole drama that was manufactured by his teammate Brandon Graham where he was saying him and A.J. Brown were beefing. They weren't really on the best of terms. Well, you could have told me that, and me believe it with the way that they look today. They were looking like 07 Brady and Randy Moss. Joey Porter Jr. was just getting cooked all afternoon by A.J. Brown. Devontae Smith, he also made some big plays as well. And it was initially thought that the Eagles were only going to go as far as what Saquon Barkley could take them. They were a run-first team, and Saquon Barkley was the heart and soul of that offense. And if he didn't have a good performance and he had to rely on Jalen Hurts to win games with his arm, they were not going to be able to do so. Well, Jalen Hurts put those doubts to rest, man, because this is one of the best performances that I've seen him have all season long. The Steelers got a really good defense. They got a really good pass rush, and their secondary has played pretty good for the most part, but the day Jalen Hurts just went to work, he was just surgical this afternoon. And how about that Eagles defense? They made Pittsburgh look like a JV offense. There were a lot of passes that were batted down at the line of scrimmage by that Eagles defensive line on Russell Wilson. It just felt like every time the Steelers snapped the football, this Eagles defensive line was pushed them backwards. They only allowed 56 total rushing yards from the Steelers, and they didn't really give up a lot of big passing plays. And one of the biggest reasons why the Steelers' offense lacked explosiveness in this game was because they were without George Pickens. Now, George Pickens is a really good receiver, but with the way this offense looks without him, you can make the argument that he may be the best receiver in the league. Now, I don't mean that literally, but when you think of his impact, you wouldn't think that losing a wide receiver with how good the Steelers have looked all season long on that side of the football would just have such a negative impact. You would be hopeful that maybe you could have a Pat Freiermuth, a Calvin Austin, a Mike Williams, who you traded for at the trade deadline to step up, but nobody really was able to get it done. And kudos to that Philadelphia Eagles defense. That pass rush was outstanding. That secondary did a really good job. I was not expecting for the Steelers to just get outright boat raced by the Eagles this afternoon. I really believe that the Steelers had a good chance at winning this game, but I was wrong. It seemed like Pittsburgh couldn't do anything right. They had tons of penalties. You had Najee Harris fumbling the football. And at that point, once that occurred, you knew the game was over because you were already struggling to have success offensively. And when you were actually able to get a little bit of rhythm going, you're down 20-13. Then all of a sudden, you choke up the pigskin on a toss play that Arthur Smith just needs to stop calling. That's one thing that irks me about Arthur Smith. Even though something doesn't work, he just continues to stick with it. Like, you have to pivot, my dude. You knew that toss play wasn't going to do anything because it wasn't doing anything all game, so why keep spamming it? And eventually, it bit the Steelers in the butt. And in the second half, the Steelers' defense was on the field for the majority of that time. And the Eagles did a really good job of just clocking Pittsburgh. They went on these long-ass 7, 6, 10-minute drives. Like their first drive in the second half, they got a field goal out of it. It was 13 plays, 47 yards. It lasted 7 minutes and 8 seconds. Then on that drive that they had after they recovered the Najee Harris fumble and they went up 27-13, that was 13 plays, 74 yards. That went for 6 minutes and 33 seconds. And then on their last possession, they had the ball for 10 minutes. They pretty much took all the time that was left in the fourth quarter, and they went on a 21-play, 88-yard drive, and that won the game for Philly. Pittsburgh didn't even have another chance to possess the football and possibly come back. And my biggest takeaway for Pittsburgh after how this game went is that I might have to hop back off that Super Bowl bandwagon because if your offensive line is going to play this way against whether one of the better defensive lines in the NFL, how are you going to fare come playoff time if you got to play the Buffalo Bills or you got to play the Kansas City Chiefs? And if you can take away George Pickens, even when he's on the field, if you can double team him or you got a really good shutdown corner, you can eliminate him from the game. This is an offense that just doesn't have another counterpunch because you don't have another good wide receiver outside of George Pickens that can make big plays. You got Calvin Austin, but Calvin Austin is one of those guys that he's only beneficial when you have George Pickens on the field because having George Pickens opens so much up for the Steelers passing game. So when you don't have a Pickens or when you can take him away, you just take away what has been the strength of the Steelers offense all year long, which has been their ability to have a lot of success throwing a deep ball down the field. Remember, Russell Wilson has those patented moon balls. We didn't really see any of them this afternoon because you didn't really have a legitimate outside perimeter threat that made the Eagles secondary have to have any fear about you being able to generate those explosiveness. And your offensive line, with you not giving Russell Wilson a lot of time to throw the football, that didn't help neither. And the run game wasn't there. And the two biggest things the Steelers want to do is they want to run the football. They want to get the play action passing game going. That's how they get those explosiveness or those explosive plays, those explosives to George Pickens and to all those wide receivers down the field. So this just was a nightmare game for Pittsburgh. Everything that went wrong, and then some. It seemed like the refs weren't on their side. And moving forward, Pittsburgh still is going to be able to win the playoff game. I don't really see this outcome changing too much of that because if you can hold on to the division, you probably end up having to play the Chargers. Maybe you luck up and you get to play the Ravens again. But, I can't really see this team going anywhere further than the divisional round because eventually you're going to have to run into a team that kind of is similar to Philadelphia defensively, like Kansas City or like the Buffalo Bills. And with Buffalo having a defensive-minded coach, there's no way in hell he's going to allow George Pickens to just have a big game and to just decide the outcome of it. You're going to need somebody else to step up at wide receiver, and the Steelers don't have nobody in that wide receiver room who can answer the call. This is still going to be a pretty good season. My expectations for this year was to at least for Mike Tomlin to win a playoff game. That looks like it's still going to happen, but as far as being a sleeper Super Bowl pick, I really don't see it with how this game went.